Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Falkirk Council Scrutiny Committee, Tuesday, 21st of April. And just at the beginning, I'll say the purpose of scrutiny is to scrutinise in depth services and how they are performing. The aim is not to criticise, but to ascertain if a service is doing what it's supposed to do and how that can be improved upon if necessary. Scrutiny allows probing and investigation of reports that ensures transparency and accountability. So agenda item 1, do we have any apologies?
We do, Convener. We've got apologies from Councillors Anslow, Colley, Mackie-Brown and Robertson.
Thank you. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Members should declare any financial and non-financial interest they have in any item of business at this meeting, identifying the relevant agenda item and the nature of the interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? No. Agenda item 3, minute of the meeting of the Scrutiny Committee held on 17th of March, pages 3 to 14 on your agenda papers. Can we agree the minute? Thank you. Any matters arising from that minute? Agenda item 4, rolling action log, pages 15 to 17, and we'll go to Mr. Purry for that.
Thank you, Convener. This is just simply the standard report which sets out any actions or reports that the committee has asked for. As you can see, all of the requests are currently in progress and will be reported by the expected date. Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item 5 is a petition on Hog Lane parking. It's a report by the Director of Transformation, Communities and Corporate Services, 18 to 54. And we have a deputation. I'll just go to Mr. Purry to explain what in the first place why we have petitions coming to scrutiny now.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, as you note, today this report is a petition to do with Hog Lane parking. The Council introduced new standing orders in 2024, which included the provision for petitions to be made to the Council from members of the public or organisations to bring to the attention issues which weren't presently on agendas. We've had a number of petitions since then, but this is the first one which has worked its way to committee. Normally, can't really think of other reasons where they would go elsewhere. These petitions are about performance, so would come to the Scrutiny Committee in the first instance. So the report before you gives you the petition, and the process that was set out is that the petitioners are entitled to come and address the committee. So we have the lead petitioner here, Suzanne Scott, and she'll speak to you in a minute. After that, the committee can ask questions of Suzanne, or indeed the officer can give a right to reply. And then at that point, the committee will be left to decide whether it wishes to take the matter further, in which case it would ask for a further report. So you have all the information before you on the matter. You have all the context, policies, budgets, etc., to allow you to make a consideration. Some of the envisaged in some petitions going forward that if you did have decisions, you'd have to refer them to the executive, but it depends on what your decisions would be. So the next step would be to get a report and to consider the issues before you. I don't know if any members have any questions on the petitions process before we start. No.
Okay, so if Ms. Scott would like to come forward to give her presentation, which I believe is a PowerPoint presentation. So you've got 10 minutes, Ms. Scott, whenever you're ready.
Ready? Okay, so I'm here to discuss the parking crisis in Hog Lane. So why matters now, and why now? The parking situation in Hog Lane reached a point where it's no longer just inconvenience, it's a safety, access and community wellbeing issue. Residents are regularly being blocked in, missing doctor's appointments or being late for work. Emergency access is becoming more difficult. Public services such as bin collections are being disrupted and tensions between neighbours are increasing. We are already seeing a wider consequence of this involving antisocial behaviour, damage to property and pressures on public services. As Scotland transits to net zero transport, the Scottish Government has committed that by 2030 the majority of new cars and vans sold will be zero emissions, alongside a major expansion on public EV charging. Local councils are expected to plan and deliver charging infrastructure, particularly in areas without off-street parking. By reviewing parking in Hog Lane now, the council has the opportunity to address current access and safety concerns while also preparing the area for future electric vehicle infrastructure and planned in a cost-effective way. So the history of the area: Hog Lane was built in 1973. As you can see from the photos, from 1973, one car in the streets to today, where cars are parking on grass verges, corners. Cars have also increased in size, meaning that the parking bays are having to house more than one car. Hog Lane was built in 1970 when it was designed for much lower car ownership. Car ownership has changed. So in 1970s, only 8% of households owned 2+ cars. Today, over 40% of households own 2+ cars. The record vehicle numbers: there's been a 14% increase in car ownerships in the last decade. Hog Lane's infrastructure has remained unchanged through all of this. Evidence from the council's own data. The result from the council parking strategy shows our ward had the highest participation. The most popular South Ward priority was address parking issues in Hog Lane. The key message here is this issue has a clear democratic mandate and a community backing. Evidence the council already recognises the problem. They've recently added double yellow lines in Island Crescent. They have already removed raised paved islands in the following streets, and they've created additional parking bays in Nairn Court and Docker Place. They also have areas in Hog Lane with allocated parking bays. In the new builds, the council has given every house a double driveway plus additional parking. This clearly reflects current planning recognition from the council of modern vehicle ownership and parking needs as an essential and not a luxury. So why is the council creating a clear inequality between new developments and long-established areas in our community? In the real world, safety is a big concern. One of the most serious impacts in the current situation in Hog Lane is the growing risk of safety and emergency access. Just to summarise this, you can see from the diagrams here, the staggered parking throughout the street is causing pinch points. Parking on corners is resulting in dangerous parking. Parking on corners, entrances and staggered or inconsistent parking along narrow streets is also creating pinch points. In some cases, there is not enough clearance for emergency vehicles to enter safely, which can delay response times and restrict access. Under the Scottish Government Building Standard Handbook, specifically Section 2, Fire Clause 212, Fire Rescue Service Access, states that the fire and rescue services vehicles should not have to reverse more than 20 metres where any dead-end route is more than 20 metres long. Turning facilities should be provided on dead-end roads as no longer than 20 metres. Turning facilities must be provided by the Scottish Government. We do have turning circles in our area, but they are now being used for parking. Falkirk's Council's response to this is, while parking in turning heads is not encouraged, this practice does regularly occur. This image on the next page shows an ambulance unable to safely access the street due to parked vehicles. The crew had to stop at the entrance and proceed on foot. There was then further safety issues when a resident showed antisocial behaviour towards the paramedics, beeping the car horn and shouting at them to move. This is a clear example of the challenges we are describing. The Council's duty of care. As the Roads Authority, the Council has a statutory duty under the Roads Scotland Act 1984 to ensure public roads remain safe and passable. In addition, powers under the Road Traffic Regulation Act 1984 allow the Council to introduce proportionate parking controls where safety and access is affected. These responsibilities are reinforced by national fire safety and emergency planning legislations, which emphasise the need for reliable emergency access and effective risk management. Addressing these pressures is therefore not about convenience, but about managing foreseeable risks and ensuring reliable emergency access. School safety due to parking. So traffic during pick-up and drop-off, dangerous darting across the road and the flyover being ignored. This year, 200,000 was allocated for primary schools road safety in this year in the council budget. Now is the time for Falkirk Council to work with our community to spend this wisely and not on ineffective blanket solutions like crossing persons, which would be more expensive than using or modifying existing infrastructure. I do have some examples on the bottom of solutions to this, which would include redoing the refuge islands for safer crossing, making sure everyone goes to one point to cross the road instead of crossing between parked cars, and railings along the school side of the road, also directing people to cross at one central point on the road. We also have been in contact with Hall Glen Primary School and the police to start a flyover safety campaign, and both are very eager to get onto this. The next issue we are dealing with is public services. So from the Freedom of Information Act that I had asked for, there was a lot of information, and basically the overall summary was there was widespread miscollections in the Hall Glen area across all 3 bin types. Certain streets are particularly affected, and recollections are often not completed, especially for the green bins. So the streets with the missed bins collections correlate with the same streets that have less than 1 parking bay per street. Next is quality of life. I won't go through these in too much detail, but basically this is telling us about people having to reverse onto main roads with children in the cars, people unable to get to work because they're blocked in and having to call the police for the fear of their safety, people with mobility having to park quite a distance away from their houses, people actually selling up their houses because of the antisocial behaviour, and near misses at the Hall Glen Primary School due to kids crossing the roads between parked cars. Attempts to engage and dismissals. So initial safety concerns were raised. Residents raised concerns about disabled bays installed in what appeared to be turning circles in Crooken Court, dangerous parking on junctions, restricted visibility, and staggered parking reduced access to emergency vehicles and service trucks. The council's response disagreed that the location was a turning circle, stated that the parking provisions for residents is not within the remit of police services as road authority. Suggestions issued should be addressed by developers of housing provided. Observation. Responsibility appeared to be redirected between different organisations despite the road being publicly maintained. The next thing we raised was public safety and access concerns. Residents highlighted that vehicles parked on corners created near-miss incidents, narrow access routes caused staggered parking, and risk to emergency access and bin collections. Council's response was action would be generally followed by an accident study under the Road Traffic Accident Act 1988. The observation by the residents were concerned that preventative measures were being limited until an incident occurred. Requests on traffic management measures. Residents proposed double yellow lines to organise parking to one side of the street, additional lay-bys along New Hall Glen Road, and community collaboration to help manage parking pressures. Council's response was introduce restrictions in residential streets could create a precedent leading to unsustainable workloads and maintenance costs. The observation was rather than addressing the safety and congestion concerns raised, the response focused on possible of setting a precedent. However, road safety and emergency access should be assessed on the merits of the situation presented, not dismissed due to potential administration workload. We have reported parking violations on numerous occasions. The responses appear to be redirected between different organisations and no consistency within the system.
2 minutes left, Ms Scott.
Accident occurred. Residents reported vehicles. There was actually an accident, and even though there was an accident, the council is still not willing to help. Basically, the summary of the response is shifting the responsibility between stakeholders, no preventative action, waiting for something to happen, and no follow-up on alternative proposals, blaming the residents, not the system. The facts and figures. 37 streets in our area. There's 37 streets in our area. 2 streets only have 2 bays per household, and one of these households is because there is a sports centre. Once that has been demolished, we have no idea what will happen with this parking, so that may go down to 1. 16 streets have 1 bay per household, and 19 bays lack even 1 bay per household. With this maths, if we go by the true representation of 2 cars per household, we are looking at 1,442 bays that we do not have in the area. Next, we have proposed solutions. Our research reveals that the challenges across the area vary by streets, making it clear that one-size-fits-all solution is not feasible. We have prioritised streets using a colour-coded system, red for high priority, significant shortfall in parking requiring structural intervention, Amber was medium priority, close to minimum requirement, 1 bay per household. Streets could stabilise by modernising improvements. And green, low priority, meets minimum but still under pressure. Streets mainly require organisation and future-proofing. These are some of the solutions we have. Removed raised islands, as has been done in previous streets in Hall Glen. Repaint white lines, as also done in Hall Glen in these streets. Allocated parking space and resident-only parking, as previously done for some of the residents in Bronsdale Court, Buttercup Drive and Glenbank. Additional parking bays, as done in Nairn Court and Dockert Place. Double yellow lines, as recently done in Island Crescent. There are other ideas from residents that will be on, if you go on to the next slide, the next one. Next one. So these are a range of practical, low-cost and collaborative solutions based on research in each street. These proposals aim to improve safety, emergency access and service delivery and the long-term sustainability. Funding strategy. You can go on to that one there. Yep, perfect. How this can be funded. So without having too much information, this is what I have had found on how we can do this, obviously up for discussions. These are lists of council sources and external sources that could help fund this. Revenue models, i.e. resident parking permits, enforcing income reinvestment and control parking zones. Also cost saving measures by reducing bin collection costs, emergency response efficiency, reducing road damage and maintenance and law enforcement and complaint costs. We appreciate the budgets are under significant pressure and we understand the difficult decisions having to be made. However, continuing to do nothing also carries a cost through missed collections, repeat visits, enforcement time and risks associated with restricted emergency access. The solutions are not about creating a new financial burden, it's about using existing funding streams more strategically and reducing avoidable optional costs over time. We are ready to work constructively with Falkirk Council to explore realistic funding options and phase solutions. We are asking for a partnership and practical problem solving. Residents of Hall Glen are not here simply to complain. We are here with evidence, research and practical solutions. Over the past 2 years, we have repeatedly tried to engage, highlight risks and offer constructive ideas. The parking pressures we have shown today are not theoretical. They affect emergency services, road safety and daily lives over hundreds of families. The problem in Hall Glen are clear, the evidence is here and the solutions are achievable. What we need now is the Council's willingness to act. We are not asking the Council to solve this alone. We are asking for the opportunity to work with you to deliver practical improvements that make our streets safer and more accessible. By working together, we can turn a long-standing problem into a positive example of community and Council partnership. Hall Glen residents have shown the problems and proposed solutions. We now ask the Council to be part of the solution. Now is the time to make a difference in Hall Glen. Parking problems are clear, solutions are ready, and the community is eager to help. Let's reduce antisocial behaviour, support emergency access, increase safety of residents, reduce additional service costs, and relieve financial pressure on the area of deprivation. This is an opportunity to show how the Council and the community can work together to create meaningful change where it matters most. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Ms Scott, for that detailed presentation. I'll now open it up to members for any questions. Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, Provost. Thank you, Suzanne, for that excellent presentation. It was full of some wonderful detail. A couple of things that I picked up from it are a willingness to actually work with the Council and an understanding from yourself that we do face funding problems within the Council itself. A couple of wee questions that I have for you, Suzanne. Well, you mentioned it's actually in your written statement, I think, where you mentioned some anti-social behaviours which are being displayed. Could you give just a wee indication of what those, how they manifest themselves?
Yeah, so some issues that we've been having is people thinking they own spots in the car park. They purposely park quite close to other cars so the other residents cannot get in and out of the cars. There's misuses of disabled bays in the area as well. So yeah, a lot of blocking cars in purposely because people are angry that you've taken their space.
Yeah. Within the report that we have in front of us, part of your submission, at page 28, number 19, Lady Emma Malone complains of parking in disabled spaces. This is an offence and it should be reported to the police. You've just reiterated that some people are, excuse me, some people are displaying these antisocial behaviours where they feel that they own parking spaces or parking bays. Is this not a police problem rather than a council problem, Suzanne?
You would think that, and we have contacted the police, and as I said in the presentation, there's a lot of redirecting. The police have put it back on the council as it's not classified as fraud. They would deal with it if it was a fraud situation. An example that the blue badge is not their badge, it is a copy of someone's badge or it has been stolen. That is the only reason that police would get involved. Otherwise, if people are misusing blue badges, they've put it back on the council. I know that there has been at least 5 reports of this to the council and nothing has eventuated from that.
Okay, thank you. Final question, 2 points basically. You mentioned in your presentation bin collection problems, bins being missed. I'm assuming that's because trucks can't get past, whatever. Also the question of doctor or hospital appointments being missed because of inconsiderate parking. Again, that would be, I can only imagine, you know, if someone's on a drive, I'll speak to Mr. McGregor later, but so my understanding is that the legislation is that somebody who parks over your driveway and prevents you exiting is an offence. However, if they park over the drive and prevent you getting into your parking bay, it's not an offence. Have you? What's the regularity of such incidents like this? I mean, have you any idea?
So on your first point, I don't know if you can go back to the slide on the public services. There is actually a picture on the bottom corner of a bin truck trying to get into the street. So yes, it is because of the parking that there's not enough space for the bin trucks to get into. In regards to blocking the car park, blocking people in, just to give you a bit of an idea, we have very minimal driveways in Hog Lane. It's all on-street parking and parking bays. So in regards to the legislation about parking in front of driveways, that's obsolete to us. We do not have driveways in Hog Lane. But in regards to how often that happens, I can only speak personally on my street from visions, but it happens at least twice a day in our street for people getting blocked in. I've personally been blocked in and had to call the police because they would not move. And then I was left intimidated by the people that had to come out and move the car. And I had to phone the police back just to stay on the line, as I felt very intimidated by the people basically walking around, taking pictures, screaming at me, just because they wouldn't move to let me go to work.
Okay, thanks, Suzanne. Thanks for an excellent presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Councillor McCabe. We'll now go to Councillor Binney.
Thank you, Provost. I want to say thank you, Suzanne, for leading on this very important issue regarding improving parking in Hog Lane. I do note from the petition there is a lady who actually says there's been a problem in Hog Lane and been living there since 1991. And it's, you know, there's been a problem from that time, from the 70s, which is really quite interesting. And I do know, like, we have moved on as a community, more people have got cars and things like that. But I'm aware, obviously, of some of the issues, like in Hog Lane, regarding the parking. I do know there's 500 people that signed this petition, and I'm just wondering if you can tell me about your previous engagement and obviously the residents of Hall Glen with our housing and road services. If you could tell me a little about this engagement, what has happened in the past, and has there been any measurable actions? I know you've mentioned actually in your report that some things have been done, double yellow lines have been put down, and some areas have been cleared for parking spaces. I'm really happy about that. That's actually been positive. So my question is, has there been any positive measurable actions that have already taken place to improve the parking already, more than what you've said actually in your presentation, Suzanne?
Thank you for the question. So with those measures that have been done, that was all done previous to this petition going into place. Since we have been, well, since myself and the action group have been on top of this for the last 2 years, there has not been any measurable actions been taken. We have had a few meetings with the council in regards to what could happen given solutions. We were basically told that it's not about who screams loudest, that we'll get what they want. If we give it to you, we have to give it to other people. This is verbatim. This is not taken from what they've said. And also that if this comes to anything, they will say no, they don't think it's a worthy cause. So no measurable action at all.
So there's been none recently then, Suzanne.
No.
Thanks for that information, and thanks for your presentation. It was very good, a lot of detail. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Vinnie. We'll now go to Councillor Balfour, Deputy Provost Balfour.
Thanks, Provost. Thanks for this, Suzanne. Just a couple of wee questions. One of them's on the back of the questions raised by Councillor McCabe, the blue badge. I kind of got the impression from that bit of the discussion there that you mentioned that it was to do with the police would get involved if it was to do with fraud regarding a blue badge. But is it the case, rather than that, is it the case that it's people that don't have a blue badge that are parking in the disabled bays?
It's more they're misusing the blue badge, so it may be for a person that is not in the vehicle at the time. So they're taking ownership of that parking bay when it's not needed. So it's not the person that's driving the car and parking the car that needs the blue badge.
Right, I'm not quite understanding. So is it somebody with the user of the blue badge that's not using it correctly, or is it people parking in a disabled bay that don't have a badge?
So say, for instance, the driver is not the holder of the blue badge, it is a passenger, someone in their household, say their partner or their child. They're the owner of the blue badge. The driver who does not require the blue badge will park in the disabled bays when the person that needs the blue badge is not present in the car.
Right, okay, right. Yeah, that is offence. Well, as far as I understand it, the blue badge should be displayed for the person that owns the blue badge or has the blue badge, is going to somewhere or coming back from somewhere. I don't think you can just sit in the car with the blue badge. That's not permitted. It would only be if the person that has the blue badge has to go somewhere, as in into a doctor's appointment or something like that. But they can't just sit in the car with the blue badge if they're not exiting the vehicle. Right, so it was just to get a wee bit of clarification on there. The other thing was, I mean, similar issues like this are happening all over the district, everywhere. I mean, my area, they've even lost a well-used bus service because the bus just couldn't get round. So it does happen everywhere, unfortunately. The obstructions, as far as I understand, it is the police that deal with any obstruction. If somebody obstructs you for any reason, then that's a police matter. And the other wee quick question is, the yellow lines that have been put in, have they been successful, or is there still people parking on the double yellow lines?
So I'm going to answer to your first question. Yes, being blocked in is a police matter, and that is who we contact. But again, it's to reduce the stress on the police force. They're obviously the same as everywhere at the moment, very understaffed. So it's a case of, are they able to get out in time to move the car or contact the person to be able to get you out, to let you to work, let you to a doctor's appointment, hospital appointment, whatever it may be. So yes, it is a police matter, but if we fix the parking, that would relieve the stress on the police officers having to attend these sites. In regards to the yellow lines, they are acting as a deterrent. There is the occasional car that does park on there, especially as it's near the school. For pick-up and drop-offs, that's mostly when people may park on those yellow lines. But one of the solutions for this is, once the Hall Glen Centre has been fully demolished, there is a full area there to create more parking for the school drop-off and pick-ups.
Okay, so out with the sort of drop-off and pick-up times at the school, the yellow lines are fairly successful at stopping people parking there.
Yes, correct.
Right. Okay. Right. That's all I wanted to ask at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Deputy Provost Balfour. We'll now go to Councillor Forrest.
Hi. Thanks for your presentation, Suzanne. It was very, very good. Obviously, you've spoken to a lot of people and gained an awful lot of information. You say that there's 1,142 bays short within the area. That's a heck of a lot, isn't it?
Yep.
And most of this was because the estate was built way back when there weren't as many cars on the road. So it's a problem that is national and international. You say that we could possibly recoup some of the cost of creating these bays by doing parking permits.
Yep.
But you've spoken to the people themselves, and some of them think that they already own the bays.
Correct.
So they're not likely to fall over themselves to purchase a parking permit. And if they think they already own it. So this would be a problem, and also it would be a problem for the council to enforce the parking in those bays. If someone chooses not to purchase a parking permit and they start doing it, visitors, etc., then we've got a problem, and that would be an extra cost. I appreciate what you've said, but this I can't see as a goer, although I'm sympathetic with all the problems that you have. Is there another way you can come up with to help fund this? Because it is to put in even half the number of bays, that would be very, very expensive.
Of course. So in regards to your question there about people thinking they own the bays, they don't necessarily mean that is legally their bay. It's just they park in it. So in their mind, they see it as their bay there. If they were to be put into house numbers for each bay, that's also a revenue model for you're getting the money for the parking permits. And if people are parking in the wrong bays, there will be fines on top of that. The same as with repainting the white lines. You can, under Contravention 24, you can fine people £70 for parking over the white lines. So there is, again, I would have to go into it. Indeed, this is just stuff that I have researched and found. There is obviously going to be other ways, things that will work and won't work. I'm obviously not clued up on the council's legislations and stuff. But from an outsider's point of view, there is fines for parking over white lines. There would be fines for parking in bays that are not allocated for yourself, fines for parking on the double yellow lines. These are all money that can be coming back in to pay for these costs.
I thought that is exactly what you were going to say. The cost of actually putting someone out to put tickets.
Councillor Forrest, we're not here at this point to make any decisions on it.
Okay,
It's just
my
question and
apologies.
answer.
My apologies, but
No, that's
yeah.
okay.
We'll go to Councillor Meikle-John, then Councillor Patrick.
Thank you, Provost. Now, I'm dreadfully sorry for being late, but a few technical difficulties getting connected this morning. But just thanks to Suzanne for the presentation. I found it really interesting, and I would commend the work that's gone into producing this. I actually think it was really helpful for the community to produce this, and there's some really interesting stuff in there. But I really would think I would like our officers to go away, have a look at all those suggestions and come back with something, Provost, that could reflect on how we might deal with some of this. While it focuses around Hall Glen, other colleagues have said that there's issues all over the district, and that is true. Therefore, I think it's something that we need to try and address one way or another, and be realistic about what is achievable and what's not achievable. I can see a few things in the suggestions there that potentially could be relatively low cost, but actually make albeit a small impact, but it is something that could be done to make an improvement. But I really think that that's well done to the community for pulling this together. And there's a lot of things in there that are really worth thinking about, but we need to think about it in the context of the whole council area as well, but also about our local place plans for each of our communities, and how the community might want money invested in those communities as well as part of our participatory budgeting. So I think it's quite innovative. I hope others take a little bit of guidance from this petition coming forward, but I think it's really useful, and we'd really like to see our officers get stuck in about it and come back with something that could be given further consideration by members.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Councillor Meikle-John. We'll now go to Councillor Patrick.
Thank you, Suzanne. And really, I just want to mirror, I think, what Councillor Meikle-John has said, that and other councillors, that's been a huge amount of work that you've done. But it's also important is that you have 500 people here signing a petition, but it shows you, I'm sure there's many more over above them that have the same desire to get something sorted. And I think the concern is this aspect of trying to do things. What can we do to make it to make things easier for people? But it is very disappointing when the kind of antisocial side of that comes in, where people basically, I'm doing what suits me and I don't really care. I'm parking here anyway, and if that means you can't go to work, and that's really disappointing that happens in our communities. But it does also seem to me that there's some quite simple things. You just simply said removing maybe a few of the raised islands are just not really necessary anyway. Perhaps some of the line parking. Have you noticed any difference now that we are trying to enforce people parking on the pavement? I mean, again, is that not?
No, so going by the report from last year, obviously pavement parking didn't come into effect as I think it was August last year. So there'd only be a few months incorporating that. But looking at the report on the tickets, there was 0 parking on pavements tickets issued for the last sector for the whole of Falkirk, not just Hall Glen. So yeah, I don't feel like that has brought anything. People are still parking on the islands because they literally have nowhere else to park. That is the only option they have.
And again, I think not just even residents, presumably it's also a difficulty for people coming to visit in any way, or anyone coming in with services who would where to park, and that leads to difficulties because you then at parking, perhaps on occasions causing problems for others as well.
Shift work, so I work quite late, so I can find myself, if I'm working till 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, that I can't get parked in my street, and I have to park 2 streets away and walk the streets, which are very badly lit at 2 o'clock in the morning by myself. But that's just the reality that Hall Glen is at the moment.
And it's the reality of areas being built with, as you say, no driveways and the huge proliferance in the number of cars, isn't it, too? But that is reflected across the district. I know from I'm sure we've all got experiences elsewhere, but thank you again. I really do commend that work. At least that pulls a community together to try and encourage people to, within the restrictions, at least at the moment, to park.
Yeah, of course.
Considerately. Thank you.
No, thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Patrick. I'll now go to Mr Perry to maybe summarise where we are.
Thanks, Convener. I think obviously you've had the presentation and you've had a good number of questions, and during that, Councillor Meikle-John, and I should say Councillor Meikle-John substituting for Councillor Colley today, to say that suggesting that the committee ask for a report on the issues raised, and I think Councillor Patrick agreed with that. So there's probably a general feeling that that's the direction the committee want to go on, but I think it's probably just proper to invite Gary to come back with a response, perhaps mindful that it's going to be taken further at the next meeting, but maybe just to give a very brief overview of the service position.
Okay, Mr McGregor.
Yep, thanks, Provost. So, probably first and foremost, just to note that me personally, I've been involved, and as a council, we welcome the time taking that the community have brought this forward, this community issue. So, I can only apologise if the community don't feel the officers have engaged effectively or sympathetically in these matters. We recognise as a local authority that parking pressures are disruptive for residents and visitors alike. And we appreciate the concerns being brought to our attention, obviously. What I would note is that these are all noted within our extensive consultation that we carried out as part of the parking strategy that was approved at Executive in December 2025. And from that parking strategy, we have a clear action plan and a number of actions and a number of different themes that have been stated on how we're going to progress that. So, for instance, on action 1.5 of our parking strategy, we have to produce a detailed review of local residential parking issues, which sets out a prioritised list of improvements. These improvements would be delivered as funding becomes available. Action 2.2, undertake a review of parking provision in line with Falkirk Council's master plan areas to ensure a joined-up approach to regeneration. And Action 3.1, support schemes that require road space reallocation to deliver sustainable transport schemes whilst acknowledging the importance of accessible parking. These are three actions that are stated within an already approved executive report that was approved last year in December. I myself have corresponded with Miss Scott and the Hall Glen Village Action Group and on a number of occasions over the past year, and I attended a meeting at the Ettrick and Dockart Community Hall in July 2025 to discuss the matters in more depth. We received numerous inquiries and complaints within primarily our network team of engineering design and also our transport planning team throughout the council area of similar ilk. So, that could be in Grangemouth, in Bowness, in Falkirk Town Centre, in Denny, Banknock, in Airth. We receive very similar inquiries and complaints daily. What we need to do as a local authority, and I take Miss Scott's point on board in terms of we can't action on who shouts the loudest. We need to prioritise any improvements in an evidence-based and a data-driven approach, and we already do that. For instance, we obviously got our road safety plan approved last May, executive, which states exactly how we prioritise road safety schemes, and it's with evidence-based data that we get from Police Scotland and from our traffic surveys that we have. So, for instance, we carried out detailed pavement parking project, which reviewed all streets within Falkirk Council, over 2,500 streets. 13 streets in Hall Glen, the biggest proportion against the settlement, were assessed with 4 nighttime surveys and 1 daytime survey. All vehicles noted to be parked on a footway were able to be accommodated in other nearby areas. During this, we consulted with our waste services colleagues who did not know any Hall Glen streets over and above any others on the council boundary, similar to the thoughts of some of the local members here in committee that a lot of areas in the council are seeing these issues. I think probably also, following consideration of the matter raised, that it's important for me to clarify the council's roles and responsibilities in relation to park management. First of all, not all roads and parking courts are adopted as per roads services in Hall Glen. So there are housing associations that own some of them. Our own housing colleagues own some, and I've discussed that with our housing colleagues fairly recently. I think, by and large, after some research, when I was aware that this petition was coming to Scrutiny Committee, I researched, and I'm not aware of any other local authority in Britain that have carried out primarily a parking project to increase residential parking at any settlement. I fully take on board that Hall Glen has parking issues, but we're aware through the partner strategy that we through the extensive consultation, of the partner strategy, that a lot of settlements at the 59 of Falkirk Council have these issues. We, as a local authority, do not have a remit to provide residential parking. However, within the actions of the partner strategy, we have approved that we will progress these as we see fit and in line with other solutions. So I know some of the initiatives noted by Miss Scott and the Hall Glen Village Action Group, and I have personally provided answers on the majority of these previously. Residents' parking permits, for instance, would require extensive consultation, for instance, and then residents would then be asked to pay to park outside their property, which only happens in the controlled parking zone in Falkirk Town Centre at this moment in time. It would also require extensive enforcement, likely increased parking attendant numbers, and in that sense, parking attendants have visited Hall Glen regularly after pavement parking enforcement commenced in August 2025, with no major issues noted at the time. Pavement parking is enforced throughout the council area, and circa 100 penalty charge notices are issued each month since. However, the council do not have a specific budget for parking improvements. We do hold budgets for road safety and schools road safety, as Miss Scott has rightly noted. However, I do note that Hall Glen and Braes were recently awarded £20 million through Pride in Place funding from the UK government. This funding will be directed by the community via a separate board rather than the council, and so there's an opportunity there for the board to direct funding towards these issues. I personally am really keen, and I know that our director is as well, to work with the board once established, if that is a priority for them, and my officers will be energetic and creative in that approach if we have to be. I think for me, the majority of issues that Miss Scott and the Hall Glen Village Action Group have brought up have been taken into consideration for the partner strategy. The partner strategy, I know it's a lengthy document. I had to review it many times, but all the kind of comments, all the notes, all the issues and concerns are highlighted within there, and we have actions within that strategy that to progress these things, I suppose. I'm happy to take any questions, Convener.
Thanks very much, Mr McGregor. We'll bring in Mr Benny, who's some comments to make.
Thank you, Provost. I just wanted to make the point. I got the sense that Scrutiny is going to expect to see some action or an update here. And typically I like to put forward proposals that allow action to happen. And I'm conscious that the Scrutiny Committee doesn't necessarily have those decision-making powers. So what I was going to wonder if, myself and my officers can bring a report to the executive that actually makes a number of recommendations that allows us to move forward. And then obviously those on Scrutiny Committee can then see the outcome of that report and decide if, they want to have us back to Scrutiny to consider. But I think we're at a point, as Mr McGregor mentioned there, whereby funding has been allocated to Hall Glen and the Braes, and a board will be established. I think that there's work that, the transport planning team and the roads team can do to make a number of recommendations that could be made to that board about interventions that could be taken place that use that funding. And I guess I'm slightly worried that if we do a lot of work, create a report that comes to Scrutiny, that then Scrutiny then says bring it to executive, that then the community might be thinking, can we just get on with this, please? And I'm not totally clear of the added value. So that would just be my request. And I'd also seek that the committee is sympathetic to the idea that we'll need some time to develop the ideas that have come out of the parking strategy in order to make those recommendations to executive that then could be transferred onto the Pride in Place board for consideration about how to spend the £20 million that's been allocated.
Thanks very much, Mr Benny. I'll now open up to questions from members to Mr McGregor, if anybody's got any questions. Councillor Benny.
Thank you, Provost. I'd just like to ask a question just to sort of clarify matters. Gary, I mean, as you said, there's a few housing associations in Hall Glen in different areas actually. And in the past, because, that's in my ward, I've had to deal with them directly when it's come to sort of parking matters, and they've dealt with it quite effectively. So really, I just want you to clarify, are they responsible for, like Paragon, for example, like even Court, that sort of area, I have a map of that area, are they responsible for improving parking areas under their control, basically, and do they have the resource for that? So should we be looking to engage with Paragon to sort of improve parking in their areas? Thank you.
Yep, thanks, Councillor Binney. So, yeah, as you rightly highlight, I'm just looking at my map here that Paragon are responsible for a number of streets within Hall Glen, as I'm sure you'll know, in your constituency. So, within that, they will primarily be responsible for a lot of the parking courts, some of the footways, some of the lighting, but there are adopted roads within those areas. So Falkirk Council do own and maintain some of the kind of access roads to the parking courts. However, the actual parking courts where there are parking spaces, it would be Paragon's responsibility. In terms of, do they have a responsibility to make improvements? That's not something I'm aware of. I'm not aware that any local authority or housing association have a responsibility or a remit to improve parking in the area. However, like Miss Scott highlighted, there are a number of Road Regulation Act or Road Scotland Act that we can carry things out on. However, in terms of a remit in legislation, I'm not aware that any authority has that.
So, sorry, I'll just come back. In terms of contact, to improve the parking in their areas, where they should be maybe the first point of contact. Maybe sort of to make it. I do know that they have done things with parking and painting lines in the past. It's just to clarify sort of who's responsible for what. If we are going to be putting resource into things, we need to sort of divide that in the sense and sort of clarify who has got responsibilities for that. Would you agree or not?
Yeah, you're right, Councillor Binney. So any areas that Paragon own, they will have that responsibility. So I think you mentioned Avon Court. There's Nevis Place.
That's right.
There's Morven Court. There's a few streets in that vicinity that Paragon Housing are responsible for. Yeah.
And there's sort of Mertland Drive as well down that area at the bottom of Hall Glen. And that's another area, I think it's all Paragon. Quite a Culmore Drive, Mertland Drive down there as well. So there is quite a few streets actually in Hall Glen that's under Paragon.
That's right.
But thanks for that, Gary. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Binney. Any other questions from members? No. Councillor Forrest.
Thanks. I just want to clarify what Mr. Benny has said. Mr. Perry, if you could do that, does this committee or does it not have the power to ask for a report?
That's our decision. We can take a decision, Mr. Councillor Forrest.
So.
Yeah, so as the convener probably said, yes. So the committee has the certainly the responsibility to ask for a report. As Mr. Benny said, there are certain things that the committee can't do that maybe would have to go to the executive. I think, though, the sense I got from members in the room was they wanted, because this issue isn't simply for Hall Glen, although the petition's about Hall Glen, it reflects matters, as Gary said, across the area. So you're looking for a report back on parking issues, what can be carried out in terms of the parking policy, issues of the blue badges, all the things that were raised, and that's in general. That's nothing to prevent any specific reports going anyway to the executive. If they have to go to the executive, they can still go. The report that comes to you would always just reflect that, so that if there's some time critical work and some references had to be made to the executive, they can still be made. But you're looking for a general report on parking relative to the Hall Glen petition. If that's clearer.
Okay, thanks very much. So the recommendations are that Scrutiny takes a decision from the following options: note the petition and take no further action. or 2, request a report from the relevant service on the matters raised within the petition. And we've heard Mr. Benny what his views are, but it's our decision to call for a report. So, do we want to call for a report?
Yes.
Yes.
Agreed.
Okay. So we're asking for a report to come back to scrutiny based on the substance of the petition, basically. And just in closing, I'd like to thank Scott and the community for bringing forward this petition. And just to thank you for the community for getting together and bringing forward this important issue. I think it's the first petition we've ever had to scrutiny, and and it's been really helpful to hear all the issues, because how do you know what's going on if the community doesn't get in touch? But I think it's been great to read all the comments, and it was an excellent presentation that broke down everything. So there's a lot to be looked at in the report. So I'd just like to thank you for that, and maybe take that back to the community, that Scrutiny Committee welcomes the petition and thanks you for it. So we're asking for a report to come back, and we'll leave that one there. So thanks very much. Thank you. And we'll now take a 10-minute comfort break. Thank you.
to that. So it's you first two, then Alf, then.
I think I had some. Okay, welcome back, everyone. We'll now move on to agenda item 6, achievement of curriculum for excellence level outcome report, and it's pages 55 to 116 on your agenda papers, and we'll go to Ms Pringle to speak to the report.
Thanks, Provost. So we're delighted to be bringing this report to Scrutiny Committee today. This is one of 3, so it's one of a suite of 3 attainment reports that we will be producing for Scrutiny. And this particular report looks at achievement of a curriculum for excellence level. So it's basically reporting Falkirk Council Schools' achievement and curriculum for excellence levels during the 2024-25 academic year. So provides an overview of current ASO performance against key stages, highlights areas for improvement and ongoing challenge, and outlines the actions being taken to support continuous progress in literacy and numeracy. The report is brought to committee to support elected members in their scrutiny of educational outcomes and the effectiveness of improvement activity across the system. I think what I would like to point out before we start is that it's another very positive year of attainment for Falkirk Council Schools. We're very pleased with the outcomes that the children and young people are achieving across the ASO portfolio, and it is showing strong performance measures. There are always areas for improvement, and obviously we've highlighted what those areas for improvement are, and we were working on areas, and we would always endeavour to do that in the pursuit of excellence and just constant improvement. So although there are improvement areas I highlighted, as I say, we've got a really strong attainment profile that we're presenting today, so we're really pleased with that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to ask a question on, you basically just outlined what the difference is between reading and literacy is.
No problem at all, sorry. Okay, so technically, reading is an organiser that sits under the literacy banner. So technically, literacy is an overarching phrase, and there is reading, writing, listening and talking that sit underneath that banner. So there are organisers that sit underneath it. So reading, writing, listening and talking are what are called organisers.
Could you maybe just explain what an organiser is? I think that's a question there.
Yeah, no problem at all. So basically it's just a subset of literacy. So maybe if I describe reading in isolation. So reading is essentially a foundation skill within literacy. So it refers specifically to the ability to decode text, recognise words, construct meaning from written language. So that all sits within the reading organiser. So within reading as well, it includes things like phonological awareness, fluency, vocabulary, things like that. So that is almost like a subset of the literacy bigger picture. So literacy, in terms of the bigger picture, is broader and more complex. So essentially, in practical terms, a learner may be able to read a text, but might not yet demonstrate the full range of literacy skills needed to explain ideas clearly, evaluate information critically, or adapt language for different audiences. So literacy development goes beyond the decoding and the comprehension, and then includes things like critical thinking. So literacy is the sort of the bigger part and the application of the knowledge, and then your organisers are the foundational skills that sit within literacy.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And we assess literacy, numeracy, reading, listening, and talking. But how do we actually assess that? How would you score me if I was? How would you assess? How do you do that assessment to actually say you come up with 89% or something like that? How do you actually score that? How do you do that?
Okay, so there are broadly 2 types of assessment methodologies that are used in the broad general education, and One of them is summative assessment, which might be historically or traditionally what you would recognise as assessment. So summative assessment might be a sit-down test where you are getting assessed on your recall of individual bits of information. So there is that element of assessment that is used, but there's also what we call formative assessment. So formative assessment is normally the organically it's an organic process of gathering assessment information. So what you might say is you might assess what a child might say, make, write, or do, and that then would be a demonstration of their ability in that particular area. So using both formative assessment, which is ongoing assessment of a child in a classroom on a day-to-day basis, and some elements of summative assessment, which might be in your more traditional types of assessment, like testing. A teacher then makes a teacher professional judgment. So a teacher will keep a record of an individual young person's attainment profile over a period of time. So maybe within a year, they'll say, right, they've done this, they've said this, they've produced this piece of work, they've done this investigation, and here are all the sort of the gradings or the markings of all these individual pieces of information. They've done this end of topic test, so there's a bit of summative information. They also have the use of the standardised assessments, standardised assessment data in some stages, and then a teacher would make up what's called a teacher professional judgment of achievement of a level. So using that really full range of evidence, they're able to then say, right, that child has achieved that level or has not. And what that does is it provides lots and lots of opportunities for children to demonstrate their understanding, and it means then that it kind of suits every single individual child's needs in terms of how they demonstrate their understanding of a level.
How many pupils are assessed to get to try and figure out what the percentage is? It's not everyone, is it?
It's everybody in the stages. So it's every child in the stages. So we've got, obviously within the levels, you've got achievement of early level, first level, second level, third and fourth level. So at those milestones, every child in every class is the teacher makes a teacher professional judgment for them. That's then aggregated at a school level for a school to understand the RACEL data, and then that's then aggregated at a local authority level for us to understand this.
Right. And the guidance, is the guidance given by the Scottish Government, and is that for the same guidance for every council in Scotland?
So yes, I mean, essentially, yes, there's a lot of support and guidance, and Education Scotland work with schools and local authorities around the understanding standards and the teacher professional judgment. Right. There's also quite a lot of written guidance around benchmarking and how you assess progress through individual levels. Mm-hmm. We've got lots of frameworks that teachers work regularly with. And so, yes, essentially, there's a very wide range of support documentation and opportunities for staff to moderate with each other, to share understanding of standards and levels and whatnot. So, yes, we work on that both locally within the council, but also nationally.
That's good. Thank you. Councillor Kelly, you got a question?
Hi, Joe. Page 64 and page 61, the report states that moderation of measures can vary across areas, and differences in national rankings might reflect varying assessment approaches rather than a substantive difference in learning capability. Without consistent measurements, raises the question of whether comparisons with other local authorities are actually applicable. You're doing that?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it's an ongoing bit of work around moderation. So nationally, there is ongoing work around moderation, and locally, there is ongoing work around moderation for exactly that reason. We do need to have a shared understanding of a standard. There's, as I've obviously spoken with the Provost around, there's lots and lots of guidance, but in practice, that does mean looking at learner evidence quite regularly and comparing, and professional dialogue around staff. And I think that it is an ongoing process. And I think that we do have obviously things like national standardised assessments, which are consistently benchmarked, which allow us to contribute to that teacher professional judgment. And there are still other types of assessment in there that allow us to look at that more fulsome story. But it is an ongoing process around moderation. And it's becoming increasingly valid and reliable. And we're confident with what we're looking at in terms of that validity and reliability of our assessment judgments in Falkirk schools, although we'll continue to work on it, because obviously classroom teachers change stages as well. So sometimes you might have somebody who's ordinarily been a primary 1 teacher might move on to P2, so they might need to look at different moderation of different evidence. So it's an ongoing process for us to build that capacity within the system, but we do feel like we're on a really strong trajectory with that. Interestingly as well, it is a really important bit of work, and as such we have looked at the creation of a moderation post within the centre to support that work. So we will have a person who specifically has that as a remit to support schools, to network, to make sure we're setting up opportunities for moderation and whatnot. So it is an ongoing journey, but we are confident we're doing well with that, and we are at the point where we've got valid and reliable teacher professional judgments.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor McCabe. Councillor Kelly. Councillor McCabe, do you have a question?
Thank you, Provost. Jill, if you could just give the committee a wee insight into why the S3 results are outstanding, basically. And show a good direction of travel. Could you just explain to the committee why we appear to be getting it right in S3? Is that because we're not getting it right elsewhere, or is it we're just doing wonderfully well in S3?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, so you will notice our third year data is particularly strong, and that is not because it's not showing us that the primary 147 data isn't strong, because it is also strong. I think what we have in third year that we don't have in the primary stages is we have another reference point which we use to align our data with. So where I spoke about when you're making a teacher professional judgment, you look at formative assessment, you look at summative assessment, you look at evidence that a young person produces. Once a young person gets to S3, we have another piece of evidence that we can use, and that is the fourth year data, alignment with fourth year data. So for example, if you achieve fourth level in S3, the expectation you would go on in fourth year and do, sorry, did I say that right? So if you achieve third level in S3, the expectation would be you go on and do fourth level in S4 and achieve that. So those would align because you're progressing from one level into another level. And the fourth year data is validated by the SQA, or the Qualifications Authority. So Qualifications Authority gives us validated data through the exam diet, essentially. So when staff are in third year making their professional judgments about third level data, they're looking at all that evidence, but they've got one eye on alignment to the validated data in S4. So that's another piece of evidence that you could maybe use to calibrate your teacher professional judgment. That's not to say that there's any kind of attainment or issue with attainment up through the primary stages, because these young people through the primary stages are coming into third year and achieving these high levels of attainment in third year and fourth year. It's just a calibration thing because we've got another point of alignment in the S4 data.
Okay, thank you, Jill. Thanks. Can you...
Thanks, Councillor McCabe. Councillor Banny, you got a question?
Yes, Provost, I have. Thank you. Jill, thank you very much for your report. A lot of information and a lot of data to take in. I'm going back to the listening and talking that has sort of been mentioned before. I do note my wee grandson. He used to be a wee chatterbox, but he's no longer actually. But that could be for various reasons. The listening and talking overall, I notice there's not much movement in the attainment, as a matter of fact, from primary school. I notice the variance is really much the same. Going from primary 1 up to primary 7, there's not much difference at all. It's very marginal. However, as soon as they go to secondary school, in S3, it's jumped up and they're first in the table. So I would like to find out how has that happened. And I know also you've put in your report there was specific challenges in listening and talking when performance fell in some stages year on year. So if you could maybe just mention a little about that, thank you.
Certainly, thank you, Councillor. So yes, you are correct. I suppose the third year data and the rise in the third year data is almost reflective of the question answered from Councillor McCabe around third year data. So that's probably just showing you that same pattern that's happening throughout all the other organisers and the other measures. In terms of literacy and numeracy, you'll notice that in terms of listening and talking, you'll notice that listening and talking is sitting at a slightly higher level than the other organisers within literacy. So it's sitting at about 87, 88%, which is strong. And I think listening and talking is traditionally quite tricky to assess because of the nature of what it is that you are assessing. And I think we are confident, and I've obviously spoken about the moderation exercises, the confidence and validity and reliability of our data. Even within Falkirk, you'll see that our listening and talking data is slightly above the reading and writing data, and yet our positioning nationally is slightly lower in that particular organiser. And there's maybe a conversation around the sort of the calibration of that. I don't see, or we don't see, an issue with listening and talking within our schools, so it's not something that we're actually picking up as an issue that we're having to consider in terms of an intervention for children and young people. But what we are going to do is we're going to look at the moderation of that just to ensure there's a consistent moderation of the standards. Not sure if that answers everything.
It does. No, that's good. You're looking into that a wee bit more depth, actually. That would be interesting because it was the ranking. I mean, what emphasis we put on the ranking, but we do have benchmarks anyway, so we do. So that's good that you're looking into that bit further. I appreciate that answer. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Bennett. We'll now go to Councillor Patrick. You have a question?
Yes, thank you. Looking at the primary one measures, or the results for those, then they've all gone down, and we realise that these are the children who probably were babies round about 2020 and COVID. Do you think that's just, I'm afraid, what's going to happen for that sort of year or two, and we're going to watch these results perhaps progress through? And is it almost like a kind of, I'd like to think, a one-off, or is there more behind that? Is there just something else that's not quite worked either in kind of early years before they get to school? And I'm aware from speaking to teachers and friends that I know that are teachers that they're just a different experience, a different type of child and a different experience because what they've been through. Just wonder if you can kind of give us a bit of your thoughts and background on that.
Certainly, Councillor, and thank you for the question, because it is one of interest at the moment, and when we were speaking about it previously, that there has been national mention of primary one data, and whether or not there is a sort of an emerging trend around COVID-related attainment, particularly the attainment gap in primary one, associated with things like speech and language, etc. So we have noticed a drop in primary one. We did highlight that. Doing a little bit of analysis, it looks like 19 out of 32 local authorities have seen similar. So there is a national sort of similar trend that we're starting to pick up. I've not analysed it properly, so I wouldn't want to go into too much more depth than that. But what we are doing at a local level is we are spending a bit of time trying to unpack that and look at some of the implications. So this is obviously primary one who have just moved on, so they're currently in primary two. We need to consider, right, well, are there interventions required for that cohort moving forward to try and look at whether or not there are things that we need to do to get them to the point by the time they get to primary four, that's then going to have recovered itself. We are also looking at current primary one to try and understand whether there are interventions that we could look at there. I know Adam's going to come on and talk about the Strategic Equity Fund moving forward. One of the areas that Adam will talk around is about the equity gap around the primary one and what we're starting to see in the primary one data. So it's very difficult to pin down an exact answer to your question, but what we are doing is we're really exploring the data to try and understand where we stand, which groups of children are being affected or have been affected, and what types of specialised interventions we could look at to try and address any issues there.
Because I suppose part of the concern is that if kind of pretty much nationwide it was all going down, we'd understand. But when we're sort of dropping in some of them, is there something particularly which Falkirk needs to do differently? Yeah. I can understand perhaps you saying 19 out of 32 councils, perhaps are they mainly urban ones or were rural ones? Was that easier for young children or was it harder? I don't know. So I think it's good to see that we're aware of that, and perhaps as a year, another 2 or 3 years' time, we might just see that as a bit of a blip, and hopefully it's going to both the actual attainment itself go up, but perhaps our positioning as well amongst other councils. Not that we're all being rivals. We want to all go up in the country, clearly, not just to try and beat somebody else. We want us all to be increasing the percentage, which is the key, isn't it? Not just the ranking. I'm not just concerned about ranking. It's about the...
Absolutely. And I suppose what that does, though, is it helps us understand the context that we're working within. Looking at these comparators, it allows us to understand, is this a localised issue, or is this something that's wider? And I am aware, I have been involved or heard of conversations around people looking at this at a national level to try and understand if there is trends or patterns happening. So yes is the answer. I think it is really important. All of this is really important data. We have seen a drop with our primary one. I think there's multiple things that we need to look at in terms of how we address or support with these children moving forward, both in terms of the primary one that have left, but also in the years coming up, because we don't know whether or not this is a singular year where we need to look and understand, is this going to happen again next year? Those types of areas. But I suppose where we are with the team that we have now, we have a dedicated performance team that's looking at this type of information and analysing it. And I feel like we're in a really good place to understand where the issues lie and what we need to do to look at intervention. So yes, thank you for the question.
That's very encouraging. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Patrick. I'll go to Deputy Provost Balfour first, then I'll see Councillor Forrest got his light on. Deputy Provost Balfour.
Thanks, Provost. Yeah, I can remember a while back the play-based learning was brought in, and I was just wondering if that has helped to minimise any kind of attainment gap that's appeared in sort of P1, because obviously if the kids are all learning while they're playing, that's surely got to be a kind of leveler to give them all a good start. I just wondered if that's helped to minimise the gap expanding, and also what can we do to keep that momentum up to give these younger kids a really good start for getting into further years?
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I think it's difficult to attribute any one thing to any piece of attainment data. It's very, very hard to do that. And I think I'm not going to profess to be an expert on play-based learning. We've got members of the team that are very, very focused on play-based learning, and it's very strong within the team. But it is one part of what is contributing to the data. I wouldn't like to try and isolate any particular part of it. What we do have within the team is we've got groups of people working on individualised attainment within a school in an early learning setting. So what we do have is although we're discussing this high level data with you and the work that we do at a higher level in terms of the aggregated data, we've got a team of quality improvement officers who work directly with schools and establishments on individual settings. And they're looking at that more nuanced information that's sitting at the stages and the interventions that schools and centres are employing to try and improve outcomes for them. So I think it's difficult to talk about that within the context of this data set. But again, I think we do need to look at this in terms of our attainment within the P1, and I'm just going to come back to that. So within our primary one data, although we've noticed that individually to us we're seeing something that might require some kind of work, I think it is in the context of what we think is a national situation around P1 and the COVID scenario. So we are again exploring that. We're looking into the sort of what could be the causes, what we can do to look at intervention wise. If it's deemed appropriate, there may be more around play-based learning and interventions if that's being seen as something that is an effective contributor to increased attainment, and that's obviously something that will be worked on within the centre.
Okay, just got one other question, just on the back of the question earlier from Councillor Kelly. Page 60, it says varying assessment approaches. I just wondered if there was any collaboration with other authorities to work on the ones that are comparable between authorities, and see if there's any other things that you could be looking at with other authorities that would maybe help give us some more data and more accurate data.
Thank you. So yes is the answer to that. I suppose on multiple levels we collaborate with other local authorities in terms of data. So in the first instance, there's quite an extensive range of national professional learning around a lot of the work that we do within the broad general education to do with moderation. I spoke about previously about the moderation exercises. That also looks at around data and achievement of level data. We also have quite strong working with what's called our quad. So we have a family group within the local authorities. So there are 32 local authorities and we've been split up into quads. So we have another 3 local authorities that we work quite closely with on improvement areas for improvement. And one of the sub work streams that sit within our quad is looking at data, an analysis of data and support with data. So we have 3 other local authorities that we work particularly closely with, looking at analysis of data and what our moderation looks like, etc. So we work with other local authorities both on terms of things like professional learning, national groups around if there are interventions on particular areas, then we'll attend national conferences and hear where things are happening well, and then follow up with those local authorities if it's something we're interested in working on, but also within our ADES quad. So that is our 4 local authorities. We are one of the 4, and we meet regularly just to talk about these types of things.
Right, so there is a view of going forward to get a kind of closer assessment collaboration sort of thing. Like, so it says there's different approaches. So is there likely to be changes in Falkirk that are going to be more comparable with our setup to other authorities, so we can have some more comparable set of data than we've got now?
So I suppose the difficulty there is that we need to have confidence in our own data, and we need to invest in all the areas that we feel is important for our data. And I think we are doing a really good job of that. I think we have a very strong analysis team that looks at analysing what it looks like and where the areas for improvement are. I think we've got a really strong team who are focused on making sure that the work of the centre and the work of our schools is really focused on improving the areas for improvement. And I feel like one of the things we spoke about is about the confidence we have in our teacher professional judgment and the validity and reliability of our teacher professional judgment. Now, that's not to say that we're at the end of a journey and we don't need to continue to work on that and develop that. As I've previously referenced, we're looking at a moderation education support officer role specifically to try and coordinate some of that work so that we're constantly on that improvement journey. And I think once we have that confidence within our own system, when we do meet and discuss with other local authorities, we're looking for areas that we can learn from each other and continue to improve from each other, because every local authority is obviously different and they'll have different areas for improvement. They'll have different mechanisms for how they look at improvement. So although we can share and learn from each other, it's difficult to try and it probably wouldn't be appropriate to just replicate what other local authorities are doing. It's about really high quality networking and really learning from other people and saying, oh, well, right, that is really, really strong practice. I really like it. I can't just lift it and take it because it wouldn't be appropriate for Falkirk Council. But what I can do is I can learn from what I'm seeing and hearing here, and I can apply it within our own context and our own local authority. So that's what I feel that we're getting really, really strong with, and we're working together to build strength within our own schools and establishments.
Okay, that's fine. Thanks for that. Thanks, Provost.
Yeah, thanks, Deputy Provost. We'll now go to Councillor Forrest.
Thank you. Thanks, Jill. You probably answered this already because there's been quite a bit of talk, but on page 59, 4.2, we have the chart. Falkirk Council ranking out of 32 local authorities. Between primary 1 and primary 7, we have the rankings, and then we've got a cumulative ranking. And then we hop to S2. Is there two separate tables for primary and secondary, or is it just the one extra feature that we take into account for that?
So essentially, primary 1, primary 4, primary 7 and S3 are the milestones points where children achieve a level. So by the end of primary 1, they've achieved early level, or they should be on track to achieve early level. By the end of primary 4, they're on track to achieve first level. By the end of primary 7, notionally, they should have achieved second level. And then by the end of S3, they should have achieved notionally third level. So that's all within the same system. So they are all collectively within the same system. They are working within a curriculum for excellence, which has that framework of continuity. And those are the assessment points. So essentially from early level all the way to the end of S3, that's all within the same assessment framework. The thing that makes third year different is because within a secondary school, you've obviously got S1 to S6. And third year is obviously coming up to halfway through that journey. So the teachers who are teaching S3 are also teaching young people in S4, which is into the qualifications phase, so the senior phase of the school. So what the third year teachers, when they're making their teacher professional judgments, also have is that additional point of reference, which makes that data look slightly different. But that early level all the way to the end of S3 is within the same framework, within the same assessment framework.
Right, thanks. It's a heck of a difference between P7 and S3. There is one other thing in listening and talking. It went from a 14th place in P1 and then up to P7. It actually went downhill slightly there to 16 and then back up to number 1 in S3. What makes that? Is it different interests, things like that?
Thank you, Councillor. So I suppose just to point out at this point, you're right in terms of your observation of the trends of the data. Just to point out, that is a cohort of young people. So the primary 1 this year, will move on and will be
Yeah.
primary 2, primary 3, and we'll not assess them for primary 1 again because they'll have
No.
moved on. The next time we do a primary 1 assessment, it will be a new batch of primary 1 that have come up to that. So when you're looking at that type of year-on-year attainment, it's different cohorts every time. So if you look at primary 1 over time, you might say primary 1, primary 1, primary 1, primary 1 across 4 years. Each one of those 4 years, it's 4 different groups of children. And essentially those groups of children will all have different characteristics. So you might see in the second group of primary 1s, for example, you've got a disproportionately high number of children with an additional support need. So you might see a slight difference in trend of that data because of that. You might see in the third year of the primary 1 data, you've got a disproportionately high number of young people from areas of multiple deprivation. That might also impact your data. So what you can't really do, I suppose, is compare that primary 1 to that primary 7, because it's the primary 1s when they're in primary 1 and then a different group of kids while they're in primary 7. So it might be that there are strengths of this primary 7 cohort and then maybe a reason why that primary 1 cohort might not have those same strengths. What I would say is, though, if you notice within this data again, and again observationally looking at the data, you pointed out primary 7, primary 1 in listening talking were 14th, and then primary 7 in listening talking were 16th, which seems like we've gone down in the ranks. But you'll notice that the data actually went up.
Yeah.
So
88 point.
So I think probably what you're looking at there is because it's very cohort driven, you will see nuance and changes. It's not like there is a decline in attainment. It's just that a lot of this data is very cohort driven and specific to cohorts. What's really important and what we do with the schools is we track cohorts through. So we would look at primary 1 this year. How is that cohort in primary 2 doing? How is that cohort in primary 3 doing? Making sure that every year that cohort are having a value added to them. It's just difficult to see it through this type of data.
I had assumed that, but I hate assuming. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Forrest. Councillor Binney, did you have another question?
No.
Councillor Flynn.
Yep, thank you, Provost. I just wanted to touch on, it was just something that came to mind while I was reading a report on primary 1. Because, and I can't remember the exact dates, but because eligibility for pupils going into primary 1 changes somewhere about mid-February. So in other words, if a child is after a certain date in February, they don't automatically go into primary 1 that year. They have to wait till the following year. And I'm guessing then that means that those children, I don't know how many it would involve, obviously, across the different schools, would be older when they go into primary 1 the following year. And that might enhance your data, make it better because the children are that much more, they're older and adapt more quickly. Do you have any data on that that would, support that thought?
Thank you, Councillor. So I suppose sorry, I'm struggling to articulate myself at the moment. Could you ask me that again?
Yeah, I'm just saying that there's different cut-off points where children can obviously go into primary 1.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll give you an example. I won't mention any names. My granddaughter, she missed going into primary 1 on the current year by a couple of days. So it's no problem. Parents had no issue with that. So she then went into primary 1 the following year. So she was slightly older than the majority of children in that primary 1 class. And all I'm saying is that if you have a proportion of children, I don't know, if there's 20 odd children in a primary 1 class and 8 of them are older, then obviously that can enhance or affect the outcomes. That was all.
Yeah, no, sorry. Apologies for that. I had a
That's okay.
Yeah, okay. So that hasn't changed in terms of that process year on year. So we would expect to see the same type of impact year on year. So I certainly, in terms of an analysis of pupil attainment at a school level based on entry date and date of birth, that would absolutely be possible to understand whether or not there is an impact of that. But we won't see that in this aggregated data unless we changed. Unless we changed a date or looked at it being at a different cutoff, we might then see a difference because we've changed that type of parameter. But at the moment, because we haven't done that, what we are looking at is that consistently happening every year in the same way. So it allows us to then compare P1 year on year because we've got similar types of practices. Yep. But that's not to say that that's not something that is looked at within the primary one when we're looking at primary one data with schools when the quality improvement team are in, just to try and understand the impact of that.
Okay, no, I understand what you're saying. I do accept as well. There's quite a range of younger to older people within primary one, and that can impact it. No, thank you for that, and thank you, Provost.
Thank you. I've just got a question which I think was going to tie into the next report, but it's about, for example, page 67, numeracy, and on page 68 it says, and this is in quite a number of these reports, the attainment gap between those living in the most deprived areas and the least deprived areas within the authority has increased. On the previous year's figures, some of the reports say it's decreased, but in the ones where it says it's increased, are we going to focus, first of all, why is it increased, and is it related to quintile 1 and quintile 2, and we're going to focus more on quintile 1 to try and close that attainment gap? It's just on some of them it does say it's increased a little bit. Mr. Stevenson. Is that correct?
Thanks, Provost. So yeah, and my report that I'll talk about next is that focus on the quintile 1 learners. So absolutely, we do have as part of a strategic equity fund plan strategies that are going to look to make sure that poverty-related attainment gap closes. Again, just a point of note on the comparisons here. It's obviously again those pupils have moved to a different stage. So although when we're looking in P1 47 here in 24-25, when it was 23-24, that is a different group of pupils that we're looking at. So their characteristics may have changed, and actually there may have been more Q1 or Q5s in that cohort of pupils. But we do also look at year-on-year data to make sure that those pupils are making improvements over time, and we're not just looking at that year group in that one-off stage. But I can talk more about that as well in the next.
Thank you very much for that. Appreciate that. Councillor McCabe.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. I did have a wee question on, primary 1 attainment, particularly relevant to the COVID impacted students. But I feel that Ms. Pringle has answered it quite adequately. There's, a lot of data there that just needs a wee bit more drilling down on to see how we are in comparison with nationally for those primary 1 students. But if I could, I'd like to ask a question on, it's about numeracy, primary 1, 4 and 7, specifically numeracy. If you have a look at pages 67, 77 and 87, there are graphs there which show, we do have a steady incline, but that incline is falling off. And if I give an example, page 67, we have from 2021 to 2025, a 5-year period there. We're showing a growth of an improvement of 77 up to 83%. That's 6% over those 5 years. Now, 6% over the next 5 years will only take us to 89%. Same if you look at page 77, you're going from 84% up to 85%, a growth of 1% over 5 years. That's only taken us up to maybe 90%. And the final one, page 87, we've gone from 75 up to 82, a growth of 7%. Again, 7% over the next 5 years takes us up to 89. All I'm getting is, are we happy enough with that? Valhalla of 100%, this unachievable 100%. Are we happy enough with the direction of travel that we are? That as much as it's, because I do appreciate it becomes harder and harder to make these improvements all the time. So you will get this levelling off. Are we levelling off just at the right time, or should we be looking to kick it up again a wee bit? You understand where I'm coming from?
That's a good question.
I totally understand where you're coming from, and yes, thank you for the question. I think, obviously, you've spoken about the aspiration towards 100%. You're right. It's probably unachievable given the number of pupils that we've got within that cohort. However, that won't stop us continuing to aim for there. And I think Adam's going to talk about in the next paper around stretch aims and how we're really being aspirational about what our targets are looking like. We will continue to be as aspirational as we possibly can and aim towards that 100%. As soon as we achieve one target, we will then increase that target so that we're aiming again for an even better achievement level. I think within the context of the data that we're looking at, that is all of our children across those stages, and sometimes that will include some children and young people who have an additional support need that might be sitting in working within our additional support needs enhanced provisions. We might have children and young people who have experienced absence from learning for a period of time. We might have children and young people who are off school because of medical reasons. So always within a cohort of young people, there will be children who it might be difficult for them to achieve the level for whatever reason. But we will continue to try and work with every single personal scenario and every single child at a school level to really be aspirational and work with every single child to achieve the absolute best they can be. And I think, I suppose, long story very short in terms of answering your question, we're really happy with the trajectory of attainment that we are seeing across our schools. Our schools are working incredibly hard. They're becoming incredibly and increasingly data literate. The targeted interventions for children and young people that are really bespoke to them, we're seeing real strength there. So definitely, yes, we're really pleased with the trajectory we're working on. That's not to say we're not going to be aiming for 100%, because we always will, and we will always find new areas for improvement. And again, that's not to say there's a lack, but we just want to constantly improve our outcomes for our children and young people all the time.
No, thanks for that, Jill, and I totally accept that. If you just look back at the three graphs that I mentioned, we actually shadow the national average. I'm delighted to say we shadow it above the national average. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Councillor McCabe. I just wanted to ask the question about the parent councils, the forum and that. What input do the parents have? Can they make suggestions? Or we've never been to one, so I just wondered how we engage with them and what's the purpose of it, kind of thing.
Thank you, Provost. So at a school level, school parent councils and head teachers and management teams will work with school level parent councils on what attainment looks like and the profile of the school. We've also just recently reinvigorated our parent council chairs forum, where we meet with each of the parent council chairs across the authority as a singular group, and that's at a local authority level. And that group is specifically to look at some of the more strategic elements that we're working in partnership with parents on. So we have taken attainment papers to that group before. We've taken attainment stories to that group before, obviously highlighting the real successes we're seeing, but also getting feedback from the parents around things that they are picking up on. And so that engagement has started. What I should say is that parental engagement group, the parent council chairs group, is just newly reinvigorated. So we haven't had a lot of meetings yet, but these types of attainment stories will form part of that communication with the group so that they can discuss these attainment profiles with us at a strategic level. But that will work hand in glove with the individual work that individual parent councils are doing in partnership with their schools that they represent.
And how often are these meetings? Every 6 months? Or?
I want to say termly from memory. I can check and get back to you, but I think they're termly.
Okay. Councillor McCabe, you got another question? Councillor Binney. Councillor Binney.
Thank you, Pros. I'll just come in quickly because I'm coming in at the end here, Jill. I just want your opinion on your expert professionalism regarding the use of digital with regard listening and talking with the children. There's been a lot been said about it in the flight reports, things like that. So increased usage with digital, obviously at home and obviously at school. So with your expertise, professionalism, can you tell me, does that have an impact maybe on listening and talking with our young people at school?
Thank you,
I'm
Councillor
not.
Binney. Thank you, Councillor Binney. So broadly, digital, as you know, and as we speak about regularly, increases the accessibility of learning to a broader range of people, but also in providing depth of access to learning to all of our young people. So where young people learn best is when they've got a variety of different mechanisms and methodologies to engage with their learning. So without doubt, digital adds to that portfolio of opportunities for young people to engage in their learning. Specifically to do with listening and talking, I can't specifically talk about that because I'm not 100% certain about the apps that are used around listening and talking. But certainly in terms of general accessibility to learning, it has a significant impact on children and young people's accessibility and the resulting attainment. I don't know if, Adam, if you do want to join in at this point.
Thanks, Councillor Binney. I just wanted to add that obviously in our nurseries, ELCs, primary 1s to 3s, where they are developing those skills, the one-to-one device isn't there. Not every young person is using them. There's a number that are provided that can be used if they feel as part of that play-based program they can. But actually in those settings where they're developing those skills, and that has to happen early on, that they're there as an addition if the young person chooses to. So they complement, the iPads are complementing that work, and we still are prioritising that kind of social interaction to develop those listening and talking skills in the lower primary and early years.
No, thank you for that. I mean, as you're probably aware, we won't go into that in detail. All over the country, education services are looking at maybe banning digital at schools and things like that. But I think more what I was concerned about, peer-to-peer engagement with people now, and you've probably seen that. People are looking at their phones all the time, and they're not actually talking. Once upon a time, we used to talk to people on a one-to-one. But I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to ask, the people still use pen and paper or everything, do they? Because I came across that the Norwegian University of Science and Technology strongly advocates for returning to pen and paper in education to enhance learning, memory and brain connectivity. Because I think if you're writing something down, you kind of remember it better and things like that. So do we still have... Just an observation.
Yeah, and I think this is, I suppose, what we were speaking about previously is about the range of opportunities to learn and the mechanisms by which you learn, and the range of opportunities to be assessed and present assessment information. There will always be times where it's required to write things. You know, it is a very important skill as well. So I suppose it's about having that range of opportunities, and that's not to say that digital completely replaces the need to write. It's that I suppose it's about incorporating all those things within the sort of opportunity for young people to engage in learning.
Because some people might prefer digital, other people might prefer just to write. Personally, I prefer to write, so I seem to take it on a bit better if I write. So we'll now go to Councillor Sinclair as a portfolio holder to give a summary.
Thank you, Provost, and thanks to the committee for having me here today. Some really interesting discussion, some pretty in-depth questions, and I think a lot of the answers reflect the quality of what we're seeing in Falkirk with this report. This is obviously a really positive report. in my opinion. It shows the clear strengths right across our education service through our schools, across the combined measures, and obviously that's from the performance that we're seeing, or what we're seeing in P1 all the way to S3, and S3s are really particularly strong performance. So that's a fantastic result there. Obviously, it's not job done. There are always improvements to be made, and the identified areas of improvements will be worked on as we strive for excellence right across our settings. I wanted to touch on a couple of points that have been made throughout the committee this morning through this report, and I think the first point I'm going to come back on is Councillor Patrick made a point about COVID and about the impact of COVID. Now, if we talk about pebbles in the loch at times, COVID could probably be described as an earthquake in the ocean, such as the magnitude of the waves that have kind of washed over all of the services and all the public services and all of society in general. We're still seeing the impacts of that, and whilst it's not any way to excuse any kind of blips or anomalies in the data, it does give the context. And I think when we to look back on a point that perhaps that Councillor Kelly made about moderation, and others have made this morning about moderation, the way that we look at things across the country, the way that we see ourselves within that is the context and the comparisons that are being made. I think the most important comparison to be made is cohort with cohort. So I'll give you an example of that. When we look at the data from the S3 performance within this, and reading, for example, our S3s in 24-25 were performing first in the country, 97.92%. If I go back in the data logs through the National Records of Scotland, the writing, I'll go back to writing, I'll go back to my report here. If I look at writing is even better at SD, 97.86%. But when we look at the writing by stage in 2015-2016, when that cohort was in primary one, they were sitting at 79%. So the marked change between primary one and these same kids in S3 has improved significantly. So that's the way that the comparison should be made here, is that these kids have improved, and you can see and track back that improvement from when they were at 2015-16, when these kids were in primary one, all the way to now. That improvement can be shown. So obviously this is all being made on the backdrop of, and we're going to come on to talk about poverty-related attainment gap with the strategic equity fund in just a wee minute. But this is all in a backdrop where poverty continues to be pervasive, and it impacts everything. And there's other contexts that impact how our kids achieve and how they attain. But despite this backdrop and despite this context, there's some remarkable work going on in our schools right across the district, from our head teachers and teachers to working in partnership with the central teams, and crucially working in lockstep with our parents and with our pupils. This report is really positive, and I thank the officers for the work, officers, teachers, head teachers in schools for the work that they continue to do, and to parents and pupils for their continued engagement, and good on you for getting these results.
Thanks very much, Councillor Sinclair. I think we would all echo just what you've said. I think it's a really positive report, and most of the questions you'll have realised were more about how do we make these small improvements, which is going to touch on in the next report. A lot of it is down to the teachers and the pupils and parents, as you said, to try and keep this high standard. And a lot of in the league table, if you like, we're doing really well. A lot of firsts and thirds and stuff. So we're doing really well, and it's because we've got a good cohort of teachers and pupils. And I take your point where you make the comparison where COVID kicked in and then the changes that are made. So, but overall, it's a fantastic report, and thanks very much for everything that's done in education for our pupils. So I'll just go back to the recommendations. It's 1, notes the progress made by Falkirk Council schools in achieving curriculum for excellence. levels in 24-25, including strengths and areas requiring further improvement. Notes that actions being taken by the education services to support continued improvement in literacy and numeracy, with a particular focus on reducing socio-economic attainment gaps, and request ongoing updates through the annual ASEL report cycle to support continued scrutiny of educational outcomes and improvement activity. Can we agree the recommendations?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Thank you. We will now take a 5-minute comfort break. quite a lot in that report. Oh, really? Okay, welcome back, everyone. We'll now move on to agenda item 7, Strategic Equity Fund progress towards 25-26 stretch aims and the 26-27 plan. It's pages 117 to 158 in your agenda papers, and we'll go to Mr. Stevenson to speak to the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Provost. So this paper provides members with an update on Falkirk Council's progress towards our Strategic Equity Fund stretch aims for the current 3-year period up to 25-26, and it also sets out our proposed Strategic Equity Fund plan for session 26-27. As members will be aware, the Strategic Equity Fund is part of the Scottish Government's Scottish Attainment Challenge and is intended to complement school-based pupil equity funding by enabling system-wide approaches to reducing the poverty-related attainment gap. Since its introduction in 2022, the fund has grown significantly, and Falkirk's allocation for 26-27 will be just over £1.3 million. And with funding levels now confirmed, this remains consistent with our allocation for 25-26. Overall progress remains positive. Across the core stretch aims, schools are on track to meet targets, with several already met or exceeded, including improvements in closing the poverty-related attainment gap. Where aims have been achieved, targets have been raised to ensure continued ambition. The report also highlights areas where improvement is still required, most notably in P1, 4 and 7 numeracy, which continues to be a key focus within our current and future plans. The 26-27 CEF plan builds on this analysis and continues to target poverty-related barriers through 3 key themes: curriculum and learner pathways, pedagogy and professional judgment, and learner engagement. The recommendations ask members simply to note the progress made so far and to note the proposed plan for 26-27, and I'm happy to respond to any questions that members may have. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. The strategic equity funding, is that guaranteed, or might it stop, and what would be the effect of it if it stopped?
So it's guaranteed for the next academic year, so 26-27, we've been confirmed the £1.3 million. But obviously, as you'll be aware, we have an election coming up, and we haven't been told anything further about what that funding would look like. We are obviously aware that that is time-limited funding. We have obviously planned that in. We're obviously trying to maximise the use of that resource, and any of our strategies are to try and build capacity within the system so that our teachers are being upskilled, so that, you know, when funding potentially may be reduced or removed, that we have that learning in the system, and we're capturing things through recording sessions online that then could be delivered again in future, just in case we don't have that funding to continue going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Binney, did you have a follow-up question?
Yes, I did, Provost. Really, it was really about the future funding, and you obviously plan intervention. I think you're doing that at the moment. So you mentioned, because of the elections, you haven't got a date. So not normally, when do you hear them? Is it in a specific month like April or May? Because obviously you've got to do some planning, and you also mentioned that the funding's time limited, so I assume we've got to make progress in a specific time for this funding. You've got to see progress anyway in a specific time. So could you maybe explain that to me? Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Binney. So in terms of future funding, for the funding we received, the CEF funding, we did make representation to the Scottish Government that it is helpful for us to have that multi-year funding available so we can plan long-term strategies. And so we had been told that the money we received last year and this year was likely to happen, although it might be adjusted depending on budgets. But we did have a kind of 2 years notice of receiving that. And we would hope that if funding was to be given, that would be considered as well, that they would give us multi-year funding. You're absolutely right that we do need to see impact on things happening. We have seen improvements, as you'll see from the data in the reports that we've given. But at the same time, we also have to be aware that a lot of the interventions we're putting in place will take time to come through the system. As you'll see, we only report on the P147 and S3 nationally. We do take data for the other levels between, but it will take time to see that coming through. But we will be able to monitor the improvements in attendance, for example. We can see live data around that. So there are things that we can monitor live ongoing to make sure that they're making a difference. And as part of the CEF planning, and also the same for PEF funding in schools, if we feel that after a period of time that hasn't made a difference, we will change that so that we're maximising the use of that funding to make sure that the money does make a difference.
That's good. So you're expecting maybe to hear after the election then, soon after? Is any indication when? Because obviously you've got forward planning and you've got to sustain the initiatives you're doing at the moment. So you'd want to hear as soon as possible, I would imagine.
As soon as possible would be great, but obviously we've got the 26-27 funding takes us up to the end of June 2027, so we still have a full year to go, and we would hopefully hear in that in between period to be able to plan.
That's good, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Binney. We'll go to Deputy Provost Balfour.
Thanks, Provost. I've just got 2 or 3 questions. You did mention that we are on track, but is that 4.5? It mentions that there's one of the achievements we've not yet met, one of the targets. Can you just verify that we are projected to achieve that target?
Thanks, Deputy Provost. So we are putting interventions in place to help with the numeracy, where we believe that we do need to make additional interventions to make sure that target is met. The targets are ambitious, as kind of Jill has mentioned in a previous report, but we set really ambitious targets to try and stretch everybody as possible. We're looking at live data just now to make sure that we can put in place our numeracy development officer, where maybe there is a potential risk that schools would need some additional help. But again, it is dependent on the young people that are in the school at the time, their challenges. We do want to be ambitious, but we also have to be aware that the targets may not be met if there's been challenges within the school, but I'm comfortable that we should see the target met. It may, and I'll know that kind of towards the end of the month.
Okay, right, thanks for that. Well, just moving on to what you just said there, and 4.6, that when stuff is met, then there's more ambitious aims are set. I just wondered if, I mean, it's good in a way, however, I just wondered what effect that has on pupils, like their mental health and stress levels, and if there is any issues with that, is that all taken into account when you're increasing these aims? If there's any absence because of that, perhaps the pupils got anxiety or whatever, what help is in place to assist these pupils to learn at home until such times as they can come back to school?
Thanks for that question. So a point to make is, I suppose, about the stretch aims are we don't set stretch aims for individual schools. So as a collective goal between all of our establishments, it is trying to move those goals up. So individual schools or individual pupils are not put on that pedestal to say, well, you need to get to that level. I did mention, I suppose, in my previous answer that, you know, we would send in support if we felt a school was maybe not performing as we thought in terms of the ASIL return, and that's if we notice that a significant number of young people in that cohort maybe are not at those levels. We would send in an office support to the schools. We certainly don't put any pressure on individual young pupils or the teachers. They are there for the leaders. Our second and primary school head teachers are aware of what our goals are, and we obviously take cognizance from what their opinions are on whether those are achievable, and there are things that will happen that will mean that they can't manage to make those, and we'll take those on board. But we do want to try and keep pushing and make our schools ambitious to do the best for young people, but equally we appreciate that 100% or getting to that 90% level may not always be possible, and we'll kind of work with schools to make sure that we take on board those areas. The point you make there about non-attenders, young people that are not coming in our schools, have lots of strategies that they work. Priority one is to make sure that their well-being and mental health is supported, because actually trying to force a young person to learn when they are not in that mindset is not going to work. So our priority is to make sure that that mental health is resolved, and we support them with lots of services. We use third sector support as well, where we need to reach out, and then we'll kind of increase that amount of learning when that's ready to go. And we do use online, the fact that we have the iPads and the investment in Connected Falkirk has allowed young people to access learning that can be done. Sometimes that's done with live lessons, but also providing materials online that they can access when they want. And schools are really good at working with parents to make sure there's a bespoke package for those young people. And when it's the right time for them to come back and learn. A point I just wanted to make as well, just from the previous report, was that we are absolutely aware that certain challenges will happen in different year groups, and our priority is to make sure that young people exit the school system with the highest level of attainment that they can. And if at that point in time in P, I hope that answers your question, Deputy Provost.
If you've got a third question, Deputy Provost.
Yes.
Could you
keep
just
it? Follow on, yeah.
Could you keep it so we'll, or is it a follow-on?
It's a follow-on, yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so just there is mechanisms within the schools for the individual pupils. What you said that help would be sent into the school. What kind of levels of pupils falling behind or being stressed or being absent? What would trigger a bit of extra help?
So we monitor the data. So schools, particularly our primary schools, submit termly data to the centre so that we can monitor where pupils are in terms of their journey with achieving the levels that we would expect. If we felt that those numbers have maybe dropped off from the previous tracking period that we've given, or where that set of pupils were in the previous year, we would speak to the head teacher first of all, because we wouldn't just go in without kind of that invitation. We would say, we've noticed the data showing this. We want to hear the story behind why that's happened, because as you mentioned, Deputy Provost, there may be issues around mental health, but there's multi-factors about why young people don't attend. It may not just be the attainment stress on them. And then we would work together with the school and the head teacher to work up a programme. Usually that would involve work with our staff, because the teacher knows those pupils well, and our development officer for numeracy and quality improvement officer for the Strategic Equity Fund would then go in and do a bespoke package with that school if that was needed.
Okay, that's great. I'm quite happy that you've got mechanisms in place to help us push forward. Okay, thanks for that. Thanks, Provost.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. We'll now go to Councillor Kelly.
And just on the previous question, do you use family support workers to help in these areas? We've got some new family support workers, yes?
Yeah, absolutely. Jill was just reminding me about that from the previous question. So we do have a team of family inclusion workers. Part of the budget, as you'll know, was that we were able to make some of those permanent into the post, and we've recognised the value of those. That team will be increasing the number of family inclusion workers with next year's CEF funding, because we realise that if pupils are not in school and there are barriers to coming in, we are not going to be able to raise attainment. So we need to kind of work through that. So absolutely essential, and we'll be increasing the size of that team for next year to help that. Absolutely.
Excellent. Yeah. I was just by the by when you were speaking there, I was going to ask, it's important to ensure we get the best results for our investments in these schools where a large proportion are quintile 1 pupils. Schools with larger attainment challenges might require higher levels of investment. For example, primary schools that feed into the lower achieving high schools tend to be have the same attainment levels. Should be spending more money on the primary schools so that what the knock-on effect will then increase the high school attainment levels, and we ensure that we're using the SEF to the best possible advantages.
Thanks, Councillor Kelly. So absolutely, we've a significant amount of money coming in through the SEF funding, and when we're planning that, the priority for all of that money is to be for quintile 1 learners. So all of our planning around what strategies we are will target those schools that have the most number of young people in quintile 1. And because the primary estate has a larger number of pupils in it compared to secondary, particularly in the BGE stages, a bigger proportion of that funding is targeted towards those schools. So family inclusion workers, for example, the primary schools have a significant number there. The training that's offered is specifically, there's a significant amount of training that goes into the primary schools as compared to secondary. Some things we're able to do for both because they cross over, and also as a result of some of the training being universal, although some schools may not have as many quintile 1 learners, those staff can still benefit from that. But all of the planning has to have an impact on quintile 1 learners, and all the money we're doing is being spent on that. But as I mentioned earlier, for the answer to Councillor Binney, we are always monitoring that. So if we feel that something we've decided to try is not working and we've given it a length of time to make a difference, we will change that plan if we don't think that it's going to make a difference. So it's very flexible and agile in that way.
Thanks. Takes that long for the break. I mean, it's so important for education to lift kids out of poverty and to close the attainment gap. It's education that will do it, that and mental health. But thanks for your answer there.
Thanks, Councillor Kelly. Councillor Patrick?
Yes, thank you. I'm so interested about the work that's been done to, I suppose, reduce the S4 leavers, because I think that's a very positive thing. Does that also tie in with the recognition that perhaps it's right for some young people to leave at S4 as long as they are going into employment, further training or further educations? How does that sort of work with the whole kind of idea of we really don't want you leaving school unless you've got some positive position to go to?
Again, it's at a school bespoke level to make the right decision for that young person at the time. But our research showed that particularly for quintile 1 learners, if they left in S4, inevitably that turned into a negative destination time. It wasn't sustained. So we feel that strategy of trying to keep those young people with us for a bit longer has a much more significant impact on their sustained destination, because we may get them into a positive destination initially at leaving, and often those young people would go into training, which were short-term solutions, but then that didn't materialize in a longer-term positive destination for them. So the research is showing is if we can keep them on. However, that's obviously up to the school to make that decision. If they feel that is a positive destination that is going to work for that young person, then absolutely, then they would allow that to happen. And it's also a reminder that it's not the end. So if they do leave and it doesn't quite go as well, and our schools are really, really good at keeping an eye on where those young people are going, even into 6 months to a year after they've left, they would be involved in trying to support them back into a positive destination. But we definitely feel that it is better to keep those 4th years on, particularly quintile 1, just to give them that bit more support before they move into the wider world.
I think the whole trend nowadays is obviously leaving school later just by age. I mean, we all know people who've left school at 14, 15, 16 in a decades ago, but it is, I can understand that unless you really are something where you're quite certain that that's where they should be and it's going to continue, that you'd be better to be just gaining that little bit more maturity, I suppose. Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Patrick. Councillor McCabe?
Thank you, Provost. I'm really pleased with the overall report, but one wee query that just jumps out at me, and there's a peculiar comment made in page 119, paragraph 3.7. Officers are currently considering, based on our current data intelligence, whether inclusion of new primary one core plus stretch aims is appropriate. Why wouldn't it be appropriate? I mean, we had identified some issues with primary one, whether it was COVID related or whatever, but why? What's the logic? What's the reason behind considering dropping out of the P1?
So the consideration, I suppose, is down to that cohort issue again. So that data for those current P1s that's in this report, they are now in P2, and next year they'll be in P3. So we just have to be absolutely certain that there's still an issue with the P1s that will come in next year from nursery. So if we were to put the resource in, and because the data for P1 there shows it as a dip, we would maybe not necessarily be doing the right thing. But what we do want to do, because we don't make any decisions on CEF funding based on just 1 year data, we want to look at a longer term set of data and decide actually is it in the right place. And my feeling is absolutely we would need to put something into P1, but I'm going to probably widen that to be P1 to P3 so that we don't lose those P1s that this data is for. They will be in P3 next year. But we're also aware from our data from nursery that there is still issues around primary one. So it's not that I'm just wanting to be making certain that I'm doing the right thing and that actually it isn't just P1. Potentially we might need to look at a large group of young people because there's a cohort.
Thanks very much, Adam. Appreciate that. Thank you. Thanks, Provost.
Thanks, Councillor McCabe. Page 125, the report notes that stretch aims and planning for improvement data is difficult in the secondary sector due to a lack of progressive data sets to make predictions. I just wonder what that means, a lack of progressive data sets.
So we in the primary school, Provost, we have systems that we take regular sets of data, and the focus there is only on literacy and numeracy in the primary schools. In the secondary, we don't yet have those systems to monitor them. So the schools are collecting that data, and at the moment we are looking with the team I have at the centre around data, are looking at how can we gather that information on a more regular basis in the centre. Mainly because we want to support the schools. We don't want to just collect it just so that we can keep an eye on all of them all the time, but we want to look at that and go, right, can we do anything to help you lift that data? So it is simply because we don't yet have the systems to be able to collate that, but the schools are collecting that and they know their data inside out themselves, but we just want to be able to have that centrally to support them with their improvement journey.
Okay, thank you very much. Next question is, Ms. Pringle.
Sorry, Provost, sorry. I was just going to add a little bit there in there because the bit. Sorry, my bad. Apologies, thank you. I just wanted to add in there that the bit that you're referring to in the paper is around progressive data sets associated with alternative certification models. So the reason that statement's there is almost just that it's difficult to look at trends, because there was obviously, I know we've spoken about this in previous scrutiny, in 2019-20 and 2021 SQA data it was assessed in a different way, so there was a slight peak in attainment levels at those years. So I guess that statement in that paper is just basically to say, look, we can't look at that as a complete data set and compare like with like. We need to be very cautious about looking back to 1920 and 2021 to set targets. So that was just to add that bit in. Apologies, and apologies for the microphone thing.
Okay, thank you very much. Page 120, 4.2, the report states that across all core stretch aims, Falkirk schools as a whole are on track to meet the target set, but the report kind of doesn't break it down on individual schools. Are all schools on track to meet the stretch aims?
So collectively, all the data kind of comes together for our stretch aims, and all the schools contribute to that. So the majority of our stretch aims show that we are on target. The one, as mentioned in the report, would be numeracy, that where we were wanting to take a closer look on that, and there are interventions in place to support schools. But I'm comfortable that we should be able to make all of the stretch aims that we've set.
Any further questions from members? We'll go to Councillor Sinclair, the portfolio holder for education, for a summary.
Yep. Again, thanks, Provost. And some good questions there within that session. Obviously, again, this is a relatively positive report showing a narrowing of the poverty-related attainment gap in Falkirk, and obviously the plan going forward for this academic year. The data obviously still shows that there are some challenges, and as with anything when it comes to things like that, there are always improvements to be made. But we have a really professional, dedicated team of educational specialists, educationalists, pedagogues, teachers, head teachers, support staff, including family support and inclusion workers, our community learning development and ETU as well, all involved in getting it right for all of our children and for every child and every young person in Falkirk. But again, it all comes back to the gap is there because it's poverty related, and so long as we continue with that backdrop, that gap will stubbornly remain there. And obviously it's not, we can do as much as we possibly can. It's up to national governments to do as much as they possibly can to sort out and tackle the root causes of poverty, so that we're not looking at a gap between the richest and poorest in society. So next steps, obviously there are plans in place to take forward more targets and aims in 26-27. Clearly, in terms of funding, there are still decisions to be made over CEF and PEF funding, and I know that COSLA and the Scottish Government and individual authorities, along with the likes of ADES and other bodies, are engaging on a regular basis on this. I don't think it's lost on anybody that this funding is important to local authorities, but also that it's important that it's there, or some form of funding is sustainable going forward for this type of work to try and address these situations. So that dialogue continues. But any plan and any funding in place for this year is there and it's secure, and our teams will take that forward with our children right at the heart of everything that they do, as they always do. And I thank them for all the work that they do on this. Thank you, Provost.
Thanks very much, Councillor Sinclair. I totally agree with you. I think that the root cause is poverty. And I think that inequity needs to be addressed nationally to get a levelling up, so everybody's got a fair chance, an equal chance. But it's good that we've got the funding that we can bring that level up, if you like. And I think the stretch aims have been set are pretty realistic, and they're on target for meeting them. Everybody will be trying to move towards that. And it's good to see you focus on quintile 1 for that reason, because of poverty. I think we've all came across kids that are living in poverty and could do with a bit extra hand. But overall, again, education is excellent in Falkirk, to be commended, and all the teachers and parents and everybody involved is to be commended. So I'll just go back to your recommendation, and it's 1, note the progress that has been made so far towards achieving the Strategic Equity Fund stretch aims, and 2, note the 26-27 plan for Falkirk Council Strategic Equity Fund. Can we note that?
Agreed.
We did. Thank you very much, and thanks everybody for your attendance today. Hope the rest of your day goes very well. Thank you.